Take your seats. The show is about to begin.
All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of On the Wire. My name is Raymmar. I am the CMO here at Wire. I am joined today by Kyle Dolan, the CTO, and we're going to get into the story of interoperability, what the problem is with interoperability. Let's see. We've got Luke in the background. We're going to bring him in shortly. Don't you fret. We'll see him just a second. What's up? Shout out to all the Mandox folks that are going to be hanging out with us today. As always, we're going to do a brief opening. We're going to talk a little bit about crypto news. We're going to talk about how we're kind of making moves in the space, and then we're going to open it up to the ecosystem. And so you'll see us bring in folks from our ecosystem. You'll see us talk about the products that we're building, but really we're going to talk about the space itself, how it's evolving, the problems kind of we face as an industry, and what we can really do to address some of that in the technology that we build and the way that we operate inside of the space. So if you are in the comments, feel free to leave a shout out. We'll be bringing the comments live up on screen. Kyle, any thoughts before we get started here?
I love the topic today.
Let's go, yeah. Interoperability. And it's a big problem. So here's the outline. We're going to run through recent bridge hacks. So they've been kind of all over the news. We're going to talk a little bit about what is a bridge. We're going to talk about the problem with interoperability, how we solve some of those, and then again, live ecosystem updates. We did have a different agenda. If you saw the show outline kind of change last minute, we were going to do like a Wire background story, but Ken got a chance to dash off to Dubai for the Satoshi Roundtable. And so he's not able to be with us. We'd figure we'd save his presence for that background video. So we're going to talk about interoperability today. So anyway, you get to geek out on that stuff with us today while he's over there doing, Satoshi Roundtable things. Anyway. All right. So let's look at this because there's tons of articles here. And Kyle, jump in as you see fit, but we've seen these headlines all over the place. Over 2 billion stolen this year in blockchain bridge hacks exposed DeFi's Achilles heel. This was a Forbes article. BNB lost $100 million on a smart chain hack. Nomad crypto bridge loses 200 million. I mean, these things are popping up all over the place. One of the challenges for the crypto industry is how many blockchains there are and how complex it is to move assets across them. So this is where the bridges come in. This becomes a big vector. What say you as you kind of see, and we can talk a little bit about, what is a bridge as we get into this, and we can open up these articles. But Kyle, as just a first thought about vulnerabilities and what's happening in the space right now, especially with fraud on top of it. So it's like people are worried about the fraud is one thing, but this is, like a technical inherent limitation here or attack vector. So just set me up as we're talking about what are bridges and why this is a big vulnerability that is kind of been exposed.
You can probably associate the fact that it's really hard and it's hard to motivate independent developers to validate and verify a lot of these like one-off mechanisms from protocol A to protocol B for a specific dApp or type of token. And it just shows like blatantly the need for a standardized, base layer that lots of people can verify, validate, mature over time, and be able to build what they want to build, on top of that. And that's, really what we're trying to do with UPAP.
Yeah. So let's go back. I mean, just talking about the bridges here, right? Let's look at this actually. So let's kind of explain what a bridge is first before we get deeper into any of this. Let's share, like, the big problem is the chains are just silos, right? Like the assets on one chain are just assets on one chain. Maybe you have an asset on another chain. There's no real way to kind of get those assets to share across. And so they create these bridges. And we'll just read here. Crypto bridges are originally intended to make sending tokens between blockchains seamless and safe, although as we've seen, that is not the case. They're essentially cross-chain communication. They become a significant concern in Web3. And then here we go. In early 2020, hackers were able to drain billions of dollars. And so this has been something that we've kind of seen start out and is now accounting for 70% of the total cyber attacks in the blockchain industry. So essentially a bridge, and let's go into this asset here because what they're doing is they're locking an asset on one chain and then allowing you to mint another token somewhere else, but it's what's called a wrapped version of that asset. Mm-hmm. And that's where, there's some gaps in the middle there that's allowing people to exploit those things. So take me just a little bit deeper, maybe from a technical understanding of what the bridge is doing, like when we're wrapping an asset like that, and kind of why that bridge is, let's just talk about why the bridge was set up in the first place. Like, let's take that with you if we can. Like, obviously there's a need to move assets from one place to another. So,
Yeah, I mean, the big original bridge, or I would say important bridge, is going to be where you see Bitcoin flow into Ethereum in order to expose your Bitcoin to, custom code, like smart contracts. And that's really where it all stems back. You are essentially, the safest way to bridge is pretty simple. I think Kyber Network did something a while back where you just, if you push all of the data from the other protocol to protocol B and vice versa, all that data is there. Now you can have like an intact tree of authority. The problem with that is, and why it's not done, is because it's like blatantly inefficient. It's not really helping to, write all this data multiple times, and that doesn't, equal performant transactions, cost-effective transactions. So really why these bridges get hacked and why they're so complicated is because everyone's trying to figure out how to minimize, like, what is the absolute minimum amount of data that I can try and bring from point A to point B, or what type of trust mechanism can I put in place so you can trust, this network of nodes that don't have to bring all of the proofs over. They're gonna do something in a decentralized way to only mint these wrapped assets that are essentially, checks from the bank of the smart contract holding the assets on the native chain. And that's where you see hacks happen. People find ways to subvert what the intent was in those trusted third parties, because that's to make it fast and cheap, which looks really good to the end users. You're going to try to introduce that external authority, so you can trust that our software and is bug free, exploit free, and we've got this many validators providing this Oracle data from point A to point B. But that's essentially what we see out there. Then you've got things like optimism, where that what they're doing is they're doing a faster, allowing like lots of DeFi apps and companies to build faster kind of centralized bridges with the alternative of their like pretty secure 7-day native withdrawal bridge kind of proof, where people have the opportunity to point out a complaint or like data that doesn't have validity by rolling up all of the data like we were talking originally.
Yeah, feel free, if you're watching, in the comments to leave any questions you have about any of the stuff we're talking about. Let's break down like the different types of bridges here, Kyle, because you have a knack for just like being at a million miles high from a technical standpoint, and we're just talking to like regular people out here. So let's try to like stay real, like simple as we talk about like the different types of bridge, because there's trusted bridges, there's trustless bridges, like so, and and then what? This is the varying degree of people that are in the middle, right? So a trusted bridge, a custodial bridge. This is like a third party's kind of in the middle somewhere somehow, right? Like there's some centralization here, some kind of custodian here. Can you explain like what this would be, or like what a real version of this might be in the world? Like what a trusted bridge looks like maybe today.
So
What's an example?
one of the popular methods was like collateral based bridges. So you get, let's say I put, $100 worth of value locked into a smart contract, and that can be used as insurance if I don't bring your data across as expected. And then that would be able to be claimed in a trustless way, where you're going to come with proof that, I pulled the rug on your bridge transaction or a bunch of people's assets. And what they try to do is they try to make it so that the collateralized assets are in a decent or good ratio, because crypto assets are volatile. So it's pretty hard. Even like when you saw when you see a stable coin fail, and there's a lot of bridges attached to that, there can be exploits that way. You can kind of imagine, I know you were just in Buenos Aires, and they have a pretty volatile currency. It's pretty hard to use that as collateral for something, with a swinging value. So there's issues there, and that's why, people have gone other directions. But collateral-based bridges are probably the most popular. Central custodian, really popular is no collateral, right? Like FTX, where it's a big company and you're going to trust them as a central custodian, but they're going to enable you to jump. Like you can go from Tron to Ethereum and then back up, and then go over to Bitcoin and back up and come down to Doge. And so it's fast, but you're basically in the hands, not your keys, not your crypto, of that, custodian.
Right. And so then you're obviously in a place where somebody screws up, like your money's gone, which we've seen. And then there's a trustless bridge. So this is just like smart contract bridge, right? Like this is just
your keys should be involved in your proofs, anywhere from as a whole, where you're saying that your transactions are supposed to be validated by something like an Oracle network, and that can be considered a trustless bridge. Not by definition, you are trusting that network of validators. And then you've got workflows where, you could say, if every proof and in an immutable way, or from users' private keys showing like a chain or a tree of who's owned that asset is moved across, that can be a trustless bridge, just at the cost of efficiency and
so
speed.
Trustless just means that it's a series of smart contracts. Basically, once I trigger the action, the code takes over and it's going to do the sequence of things that it says it's going to do, and that's an open source, something that can be verified. And then at the end of it, it's just going to take whatever action those set of rules have said this is going to do, right? You're not trusting anybody in the middle. There's no,
no third party,
right? So those are. I'm just trying to give like the viewer a picture of these two different types. And then what it's saying here is like trustless bridges are still highly experimental. Even diligent blockchain coders have had trouble writing bug-free smart contract codes, which again, like, have we seen trustless bridges be hacked specifically? Can you think of an example there? And then if not, we can jump into like some of these examples here.
Yeah, they definitely have. There is no trustless bridge we can point at right now. Because you can simply say, okay, the underlying protocol, like if part of my bridging mechanism is a Solana contract, we're trusting the consensus of Solana. So there's shades of gray there. Like a truly trustless bridge would mean that there is no third party involved at all. So like an atomic transaction.
Hello?
Hello?
Okay, you're still there. You just went, I thought I lost you for a second. You
Yeah,
kinda okay, so you're saying like there's no real like trustless bridge. I mean, that's essentially what you're saying, or like
the closest thing would be, yeah, you're still going to rely on an underlying protocol like hash time locks in Bitcoin, where we're trusting that we won't do equal damage to each other. So I'll lose the same amount of money in order to breach your trust. That's probably the pinnacle.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's then. Okay. So now we kind of know. Okay. So bridges, and this is it. This is kind of like it for interoperability right now, right? There, like, this is kind of the way. You know, that there's just one version of a bridge or another currently in the crypto space. This is like how you do it. If you want to transact value from one chain to the next, you use a bridge. And then, you know, like we can get into, you know, this Nomad bridge hack, 200 million, Harmony Horizon bridge hack, you know, the BNB chain, 100 million here. What's this? Play to earn game. Players could use the Ethereum to run and bridge transfer tokens between chains. Yeah, so there's like, I mean, this is a big problem, but this is kind of the way. So let's bring it back into like what we're trying to do a little bit here. How can we talk a little bit about what's different with what we're doing? You know, like, because as it stands today, like the blockchains kind of can't talk to each other. This is the interoperability problem. This is why people build these bridges, and these bridges rely on oracles, et cetera, et cetera. So what are we doing different? And why, you know, like how do we think we've solved this to kind of like not have these exact same problems happen in our world?
Yeah. So we create standards. The examples you just showed were code exploits, which is like common one. So standards that become accepted widely and are applicable to many different softwares will garner a lot of developer eyeballs and hacking and coders, you know, messing around with it, building a mature, you know, code base for how these transactions need to be structured and how addressing should be dealt with, which is really important. And then what we're doing is we're starting, you know, we're going to be launching wire name service, rolling it out on Ethereum first, coming up soon here. And what that is a layer that doesn't independently rely on Ethereum's consensus, doesn't independently rely on wire protocol's consensus, but relies on an aggregate of them in ways that we're creating some content to make it, you know, pretty easy, you know, to digest, which is very important. We can't have like an Ultron, you know, million mechanism layer here. It has to be, you know, easy to see, which, you know, reduces the edge for code exploits and things like that.
Kyle, let's not go. I don't want to go too far away. We're talking about. Let's go back to the bridge, and I want to talk specifically like how we're different than a traditional bridge. Like I want to go back to, you know, setting up, and maybe you got to go deeper than that to get back. But let's try to go back to like specifically how, you know, like why is wire even necessary, like to come at this problem to solve a bridgeless interoperability. And what are, if we can, talking about some of like the unique things that make it different than a traditional bridge. If that's not too hard a question to try to.
Let's just talk about two networks, point A and point B, and then the code that exists on each side. Kind of like if we had a bridge, we've got, you know, one contract and all that code, APIs, all that other contract, all that code. Maybe different cryptographic systems on each side. And then think of like the foundation on land, if we were going over a void or water, being like their protocol. The difference in the layer that we have is that these foundations are not 2 points, and they're also not, necessary. Like if there's an issue with one of these foundational points, users are not losing their beneficial ownership, authority, and proof thereof across the layer. And you're not looking at 2 pieces. You're looking at an infinite number of standardized pieces going throughout these different points, creating more strength as it grows to multiple protocols. So it's more of a fog floating over all of these protocols, or an area not independently, dependent on any one point. So that's where we're, it's not appropriate to call wire name service a bridge.
Right. Yeah, and take me back to, I mean, you like when you talk about the HTTP for crypto, like if we go to this thing here and we talk about, like some of the parallels to early internet and kind of pulling these silos together, and like these things are not new, that as you build new technology, you essentially create a silo. Like new technology is a silo. It is inherently like kind of its own thing. And as technologies mature, you find ways to integrate those things together. And as we go through the evolution of the internet, we see like multiple instances of times where, email was one of them, where we mentioned this and this is in our deck, where like first early email, you could only send it from machine to machine. And it took a while before there was a messaging protocol that allowed you to send from machine to machine across a network. And then it was even longer from there before all of the machines could talk in something called the internet, the World Wide Web. It's like a 20-year span. And, I think, Kyle, like your analogies going back to that, I think is where it hits home for people, because like we're kind of in those early days of the crypto world where all of these things are kind of new technology, right? Like Ethereum is its own stack. Like you said, it's its own protocol. Solana is its own protocol layer, so that these things are robust and secure in and of themselves, but they store value independent of one another, and they're kind of like siloed operations. They're the old computers that can only send messages to each other. And so what we're talking about here is essentially, with this UPAP layer, is a protocol layer that allows those things to kind of communicate with themselves. But that's where I'm trying to pull from you. Can you help the viewer understand like how specifically, without obviously revealing the nuts? I mean, at some point we're going to open source it all, but
yeah, validation has to take place on the individual, on their computer, with their client, which when I'm talking about their wallet software, the software they use to do transactions or log in or anything like that. They have to be making that decision autonomously from their machine. Now they have full control of, securing that machine, or there isn't one exploit that just takes everybody down no matter what they're doing. That's really important. That's one of the requirements of being compliant with the UPAP protocol. So you have to do that. And if you think about the internet before green locks and SSL certificates were a requirement, you had a lot of fraud. It was really expensive for small online merchants to get merchant accounts. There was collateral things like where your merchant services is going to hold on to your money before they pay it out to you. There was lots of, inefficiencies, things limiting growth of, the e-commerce explosion that's happened that we see today.
Well, people wouldn't even put the dollar in. Like getting that first dollar online was like almost impossible because everyone just assumed it was a scam. Like everyone just figured if I'm putting, like this, I'm not going to put any money on this internet thing. This is all for the kids and this is for the games and stuff. I remember those days where, like just nobody trusted the internet. And then SSL, you start getting some things like Stripe, you start getting PayPal. right? You start getting eBay and different systems that, again, start allowing you to trust the mechanism at a higher level than you could before, just at a surface level. So
Well, there were early bridging mechanisms between the actual server giving you the code you're seeing on your screen and the domain name. And there's a stack of protocols there related to, making emails better. There was a time where you could spin up, a domain name and send out a million emails and get delivery. Even there were tons of exploits and problems on the internet where most of the computers in the world were infected by viruses and exploits through that system. It was really bad. It didn't look good for the internet.
Right. Well, and let's walk people through this a little bit, because here we have on the left, we have Web 2, and on the right, we have Web 3. And it's not perfect parallels. We're just trying to kind of visualize here. So bear with us if you're like super technical. There's obviously, no way to 100% represent this, but we're going to try to, draw some parallels here because you kind of have a lot of similar tracks, right? There's a data layer, there's a host layer, there's a bunch of protocols in the middle, and there's a client, and the client is how people kind of interact with all of this. And so on the Web 2 side, this is your browser, this is your native app, this is, whatever your phone interface is, your web interface, your website that you go to, whatever app you download, like that's your client. That's what talks to this here. And there's, a series of protocols that happen behind the scenes that kind of enable all that data to do its work. And nobody really ever gives a shit about those things, right? Like, I don't know anybody who goes to the newest social network and they're just like, oh, I wonder what kind of like database this thing's running. I wonder what this front end is built on. And maybe some nerds do, right? Like maybe some of us do because that's what we do and we build things and like we're interested in like what the stack is built. But most of the web too, most of the thing that we call the web now is a ton of things happening below the surface that nobody ever thinks about. You just kind of go to the app and it happens. And in crypto, where, we have this ledger, which is the data layer. We have these host layers, which are your different protocols. And then each of them has their own, like stack, like we were talking about. And that's where you're trying to bridge is from this stack to the next stack. And to do that, there's these protocols in between, but there's no real unity here. That's, I think, what we're getting at is that there is no like unified mechanism for how these things talk to each other that allows a Web3 client, a wallet or a dApp to have nobody's figured that out yet.
Well, let's look at transport layer security. So that is your SSL, that's your green lock, HTTPS. That used to be an insurance-based system. You would pay the better SSL you bought. It would come with an amount of insurance. And if there was a data breach in your end-to-end encryption, from browser to web server because of, the certificate, Komodo or any of those companies they had insurance there. And that's kind of, what we're going to see in the mechanisms in blockchain, because today, now it's widely accepted that if you provide a proof on your domain as a record of, a self-signed certificate is appropriate on the domain name. And you can have, you don't need an insurance policy attached to your SSL certificate and all of that. And that is good enough. And every website needs it. And now browsers won't even work in a lot of cases with websites that don't have at least, a self-signed certificate that matches a DNS record on the domain.
Right. So there's some what you're saying is there's like safeguards in place now, right? Like these.
Yep. And they've widely been accepted. There was a big exploit. If you guys remember, you probably heard rumblings about a thing called Heartbleed, which actually was just recently shown publicly of how it was fixed, and years and years went into that. But we still used the internet, and there's still a lot of servers that haven't been patched. But it's in essence, somebody figured out that if you send, more data essentially to this handshake request that the system that was used in like every server, basically OpenSSL, would spit out more data than it's supposed to. Like it would just read from memory, give away, the whole farm. So it was a really bad exploit. And yeah, it's been fixed, and there's millions and millions of servers out there.
As long as it's been as long as the servers have been updated, it's been fixed, right?
That's a hard thing to do,
right?
To get people to update. There's people that have a website that's been up since 1996 from an old computer running in the corner of their garage.
Let's open this up. We got Luke hanging in the background with us here. We got the Mandox crowd in the squad. Let's talk a little bit, because I wanna open the conversation up here, because how do you stop this? Like, how do you stop even like what you're saying here? This heartbleed thing. The internet is super robust, right? Yeah, maturity, but like, do we just have to go through some of this? Do we have to? And what's up, Luke? You can say what's up here if you want. Any thoughts on just like interoperability and kind of the crypto space right now, and anything we've talked about?
Oh man, I am listening and I am learning. It's really cool to hear Kyle talk as well about it, and I think there's so much that I am learning just by listening. And I think when you especially with the diagram, when you are comparing Web 2 and to now where we are, and actually how much there is to go, how far there is to go, I think it definitely helps me understand a lot better what our job is and what you guys are also doing and what you're building. Because otherwise, like you said before, there's a lot of technological terms, and a lot of us will just go over our heads, and it makes me realize what crypto is actually here for and where we're going with it, what the future is. But yeah, I'm literally just listening and I'm learning, man. It's been awesome.
I think all of us, me too. Like, this has been, getting to know Kyle over the last, I've known Kyle since like 2014 or something like that, 2014, 2013 maybe.
Yep.
But we haven't really been working closely up until the last few months, and just kind of diving in. This has been a master class for myself, and that's the thing I'm trying to do also, is help kind of digest these really technical topics down into things that folks can understand, because most people, they just want to use Facebook. They just want to get on TikTok. They don't give a shit what's happening behind the scenes. And so I think for crypto to kind of like break through this next phase, it has to be more than just like, pretty pictures or the lottery, or whatever it is. And so that's where like real use cases, kind of getting into the weeds. That's where I think this show and this On the Wire is going to allow us to like dig in behind the scenes a little bit. And in future episodes, we're going to bring in if you're out there and you want to like dive deep on some technical stuff, we'd love to schedule you. We're looking for guests to book out the show right now. We've got some special guests lined up for the next few weeks. But we want to kind of try to bring these topics down to like an approachable level, and also show the real utility that's brewing behind the scenes here, right? A lot of times people think, oh, it's a bear market, crypto's dead, there's all this fraud, blah, blah, blah. This is, you might be hearing this in the ecosystem, but really there's so much work being done behind the scenes right now to build that next layer of actual utility inside of crypto. And that's where I think, awareness becomes pivotal, because it's up to us to make sure that, we got to carry the extra load for all these, twats that keep fucking this up, to be honest, right? Like, there's all these folks doing shit that's just not good in the space that we now have to overcome as a credibility layer. And that's going to become a challenge. Like, that's going to be a real challenge. And so this show is just defined. It's designed to help us do that and to bring y'all in. So again, there's going to be times where we ask you all to join us as a group and just have a conversation about what's happening in the whole space. So
I'd like to say there is a silver lining to the negative, right?
Yeah.
Like, when things break, when people find ways to exploit a system, the system grows stronger. People I get to start thinking about how to solve problems and how to improve, what can I contribute? What can the Wire core devs contribute to the space? to prevent things like that from happening.
Right.
If you don't have anything happen, then it's like you don't have any immunity at some point for, I mean, if we are a major part of the economy worldwide and something like that happens, that's a worse day, than it happening now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I got to imagine in those early days of the internet, a lot of those e-commerce shops, like you said, there was just things that people didn't understand how they worked. People got, scammed. Like grandma put her credit card in the wrong space. The next thing she knows, she's subscribed to like, the cat doily of the week or whatever it is, that you can't cancel. So I hear what you're saying, that I think some of these things just have to happen, and it's better that they happen now.
I've seen businesses and jobs lost to credit card fraud.
Yeah.
E-commerce companies, even back not too far ago, 2009, 2010, where they'll have a lot of fraudulent orders that they don't know are fraudulent right away. And they've done everything, like every other e-commerce platform at the time. And then suddenly $40,000 is being held by their merchant provider. Now they can't provide orders, make payroll to even honest customers. And you get like that was not an uncommon thing, 10 years ago. And you really don't see it at all now. It's been like almost entirely eradicated. There's credit card fraud, but there is a healthier balance between the so-called custodians or the networks that are providing these payments because of these better protocols that enable a more competitive landscape,
Yeah. Let's tie this. Let's go back into the topic of the day, the topic du jour. And Crypto G is asking, what is interoperability? Saying, yes, very intense, very educational. What is interoperability? So we kind of talked about bridges. We talked about like the bridge is the current mechanism for interoperability. Interoperability is really just the idea of sharing, value across asset chains, right? So if you have value on Ethereum and you want to buy something that's wrapped up on the Solana chain, well, being able to do that natively without having to go to some kind of centralized exchange, without having to go to some kind of swap, without having to do some other thing inside of there. And so Crypto G, to answer that question, and then we got a follow up here, Crypto Empress, what is the benefit of interoperability? Well, the benefit of
if you're doing a good job of being a self-custody actor, you've got all these different mnemonic codes stored, written down, separated, blah, 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 hardware wallets. That's not, native interoperability makes that go away and consolidate. Imagine if you had a regular Web 2 user goes to a website and it's like, this is a real thing, by the way. This browser is not supported. Please open or download this browser before entering the website. It's like, oh man, I need Internet Explorer 7 to go here, or like that's where we're at. And the future's bright. It'll be way better. Native integrations in your browsers, like you see with what Brave and Opera are doing. I think even Firefox has got something going on. Single wallets, actually using like what they call HD keys, one key, protect that mnemonic code on a hardware device or metal plates, and then that's all your wallets. One address to give somebody. You don't even have to worry about, if they're going to try to send you USDT from Wax or Ethereum or Solana. You just don't have to think about that. That's what it needs to be. But the reason it's so important to think about it now is because there aren't green locks that tell you from your software in your computer that everybody uses that it's safe and you're not, going down a bad road.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that goes back to, I did a talk. The talk I did in Buenos Aires, I just got back from Buenos Aires, was about technology fading. Like when technology fades, and there's been a bevy of technologies that we take for granted that have come before and then kind of disappeared. Fire, agriculture, electricity, like transportation, communication, computation. Like there's these big systems that have kind of come, and in their moment they were like, oh my goodness, this is the craziest thing. And in that like moment you see the potential, but it's not for another 10, 15, 20, 50, 100, 1,000 years till you actually see how that technology fades and how the impact is like spread out across society. And we're kind of in one of those moments where like the technology's been revealed, but we're in that moment where like we're not real sure how this is going to fade yet. And this is where the interesting innovations come in. This is maybe a good question here, Kyle. How do you explain interoperability to new investors? Because I think the investors already come in kind of knowing. They know this is the problem. You know, a lot of people who are investing in this stuff are kind of seeing the space, and they're kind of understanding how this technology is brewing. And the interoperability right now is like a buzzword in the investor space. We've gone to events and everyone's talking about interoperability. And we were up on stage and Ken, the CEO, is talking about interoperability at this is Coin Agenda in Puerto Rico. And Anthony, one of the co-founders of Ethereum, starts asking questions about, well, how does it do this? And what about that? And, you know, it's like everyone's kind of thinks they have an idea for interoperability. And that's where I think, Kyle, like our solution for interoperability is just better. It's not a bridge, doesn't require an oracle. Can you jump in here and tell them how and why?
Yeah, I mean,
give me the elevator, bang, zingo, bango.
Everybody knows what, you know, a green lock in their browser is, and it needs no explanation. There's a very technical explanation of what's happening that doesn't, you know, if you just were to define what's happening all the way down to now you have to explain how DNS records work, and you have to explain how encryption works. And then you have to show, you know, what a one-way function is and why that's provable. Like it gets really complicated, and it's really tough talking to investors because they know interoperability solutions by what the most popular, you know, biggest approaches are currently, which obviously aren't it. Just by, you know, looking at some of the recent news that you were talking about earlier. So it's really tough. And, you know, I do it constantly. I have to try and find ways to simplify the mechanisms and then go as deep, you know, as needed when we're talking to investors.
Yeah.
But I love the video we just created. We should like drop a link to that maybe. Well, I know we're going to be doing a release of that later, actually, with, you know, a more broader scope. But those types of things are good, where we've got, you know, shout out to Bud for doing the voiceover, like a nice dialed in step-by-step visual of what's happening.
Yeah.
With the hints on to like do your research if you want to learn more about those technical things, or just take our word for it right there. But at least, you know, if you can go to your technical advisor and they can quickly validate and verify what we're saying.
Yeah. This has been the biggest challenge. And Luke, maybe we can kick it over to you here a little bit, because you guys are building and kind of like looking and thinking about how to take advantage of some of this at a really early phase. But that's really been the biggest hurdle in my experience up to this point, is like people hear and they see and they think, and we're talking, and it's hard to get into it, right? Especially like you're at one of these conferences and you got like 10 minutes to kind of try to explain, here's the thing that changes everything. And it's like very hard to do. And then you have to pick, like, what do you actually tell somebody? And then they have questions, and that leads to other questions. And we're just getting to the place where I think the video Kyle's talking about is like a nice diagram that shows and walks through like the full process and kind of explains those things. So if somebody does want to dig into the weeds, we've got some of that for them. But we've also just kind of been building, and we were talking with somebody that just came onto the team yesterday, and, you know, they're like, well, where's your white paper, and where's all this other like maybe technical stuff, you know, that some other teams have, but like we actually have working product. You know, we've got a blockchain that's in existence and we're building things on it. And so we're just trying to catch up on some of these other edges and try to explain a lot of those things. So to answer your question about how to explain these to investors, we're having those conversations right now, and they're going really well. Again, talking about how do we bring other providers into this, because the real value of this chain is not necessarily for the end user. It's for the people who are building, who want to provide these seamless experiences to that third, like to that end user, to that final user. And Luke, maybe that's where we can throw this to you as you're thinking about creating, this Create marketplace, as you're doing other things inside the ecosystem? Like, why are these things valuable to you? Why are you guys kind of excited about, some of these innovations and what they might bring to the table here?
I mean, so for me to backtrack a little bit, I mean, we were building a marketplace, but when we met Wire, that's honestly where everything changed. When we heard what you guys were doing, and because we set out in the space to do something different. I think we launched in an interesting time. We launched as a token, and a lot of tokens. Honestly, it was just about providing. Many people didn't, but for us, we wanted to definitely keep our word and go beyond that and do our absolute best to try and make a change in this space. And our whole ethos, or the way we work, is definitely, not our morale, but it has definitely changed since we launched. And so, as we've obviously got to know Wire and everything you're doing, we wanted to launch a marketplace that actually was different, that could actually go out there and be part of a future, that maybe people don't necessarily, understand or see yet. But that's why we chose Wire, and that's why we were extremely excited about everything they're doing. I know Ken was dropping some alpha to me on his way to Dubai, and and I was extremely excited just by hearing everything that you guys are doing, because it's solving so many issues that we don't necessarily understand. I think it's very important. Like, when we do get into crypto, one thing I've noticed is that we do need to stop being I don't want to upset people, but like, as investors, we do need to be careful, because I know there's a lot of projects and there's a lot of people out there that are literally selling FOMO and hype with nothing to back it up. There's nothing there, and I know that that's been a big thing for us to learn from, and that's why we are focused entirely on people that are really building, and the way you can see the future and where you can see how these things are going to take place. And I think we definitely need to be a lot wiser as investors to look for that. And yeah, I mean, we're excited. I'm excited for Create. I know the things on there that there's nobody really doing, and and that is all definitely comes down to everything you're doing in Wire. And I love the explanation of today about interoperability, because it's a big word and we use it in spaces, but a lot of the time we just don't really understand what those things mean. And I'll be honest, like, a lot of the things, I have to sit here and really really listen, especially when you talk, Kyle. Like, I have to really listen and learn, because
I'm so excited for you guys taking advantage of these standards, because it needs to be easy. Like, a typical end user might read a technical paper. I don't know if it's labor at the very least for them to be able to use a product and be a good investor, like what you're talking about. It's not realistic. There has to be very transparent mechanisms that are not extraordinarily complex. At the very least, like, we all know, that a signature works, and that's good, like on a packet of data. So we need to like get these standards and show them, and really cool applications like what you guys are doing with Mandox Create, to bring those nice features. Because even we mentioned, like, everybody just wants to use Facebook or go on TikTok or Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
You guys remember MySpace? Like, let's go back before those protocols in Web 2 were dialed in. It was devastating to get, your social account compromised, and suddenly there's like messages going out to all your friends or the girl that you're talking to. It could be catastrophic. There could be situations that's worse than having a hot ETH wallet hacked or something. But now it's easy. The standards are there. Modern browsers, green locks, big red pages, widely accepted standards, and all the apps use them.
So Kyle, that took a good amount of time on the web as we know it now. How long does it take for this to evolve to where it's not Like people aren't worried about it. People aren't scared. Like, and there's a million other things. Like I think we could have probably spent a whole hour just talking about bridges. I think we could probably go back into interoperability a million times and have different conversations about it and still deliver value to the audience here. But, you know, as we start to wind down the conversation, how long before, you know, like these things are actually in place, before they're adopted, before it's more than just, you know, a couple guys on a stream and a couple thousand people across the web using this? Like, when is it mass adoption? You know, we talk about Wire being the blockchain built for adoption, and I think we're seeing, like, you know, that potential. But what are we really looking at as the hurdle and timeline here?
So our strategy, MegaMask, which will be available in a few months here, is basically our approach to providing like a Chromium to blockchain for, you know, these wallet interactions. A really good client that'll be open source, and most people may or may not know this, but most of the browsers that you use today are all based on the Chromium project, which is the open source rendition of Google Chrome. And there are problems with that being the only, like, it's eliminating some of the other competing code bases. But beyond that, the standardization is good, right? Even there was an exploit that existed in Chrome, I think last week, that affected MetaMask. And because there's so many developers in such a big community, but there was a patch, I think it was fixed in, you know, under 24 hours, and Chrome updates went out. So that event is close. You know, when we see other groups starting to utilize the standards, the code bases that we're building, that we're open sourcing, that are not just based in our Wire protocol. Wire protocol stands on its own because we're dealing with a, you know, hardware trust problem, which makes it a really good place to do transactions and very efficient, cheap, interesting governance. But the cool thing about supporting Wire is you're supporting the development of these things that are really for the whole ecosystem. So yeah, that Chromium event is where mass adoption happens, right?
Yeah.
Like,
and I think people need to, I think we should probably get better at that too when we talk about this stuff. Like when we open the show or when we do conversations about this, talking about UPAP or UPAP being separate from Wire, and that kind of being like, it's, you know, like that's that Chromium moment. That's the thing that's kind of floating out there that lots of people could adopt. That's separate from what we're building at Wire. Wire will be kind of the first use cases of this thing that we're putting out there. So if we go back to like this slide here, let's go back to this and jump into, hey, what happened? I lost my screen. There it is.
Yeah, so MegaMask is a Wire product and will be competitive, you know, with other wallets. But UPAP as a protocol is, you know, developed by the Wire team, open source implementation with a ton of awesome other companies in the space starting to get involved and contribute.
Yeah.
And that's not for us, you know, like HTTPS is not something that Microsoft is going to own. That won't work, or vice versa. I mean, it's something that the space needs. It was a blocker for us on our vision for what we're trying to do in the space, you know, at the system level. And there wasn't other approaches out there for us to contribute to that met the criteria. So we had to start dealing with it to move forward.
Yeah, and maybe we need to do a full deep dive on just the UPAP layer, Kyle. Maybe we should cue that up for one of the upcoming episodes. This diagram, again, just kind of showing that, you know, that HTTP style protocol layer over top of these different chains, which right now are the silos, and then showing the name service and universal addressing fitting on top of that. and then obviously the Wire ecosystem, that MetaMask wallet, and then other early adopters who are jumping in the game will be building on top of those things. So that's kind of what's happening here. And we're in the really early stages of how this is being built out. Again, we've had really great conversations with a number of key players in the space. We've got the interest of a number of folks that, if you want to go back into our first pilot episode, we kind of laid that out, and we'll be doing a lot more talking about the different partnerships, bringing in the different folks who are helping us kind of build and grow this network, introducing you to the people that are kind of doing the things behind the scenes. So with that, Kyle, any final thoughts here as we wrap up?
No, I think we covered a lot of ground, but I'm just excited. I think the real event for everyone will be, when these dApps that are gonna show, the actual benefits of all these standards and things we're working on coming to fruition. Like the experience alone, just shows you like a little window into the future of what blockchain will be like.
Yeah. Luke, what are you up to? Where can people go to find out about what you guys are building? Where can they go to learn about Mandox and the ecosystem plays you guys are making early on here?
We have quite a bit going on. We're actually minting NFTs right now. I believe the team has finally woken up as we literally grinded all day yesterday. And we minted out half. So we're minting out our next NFT collection. And you guys can check out at mandoxglobal.com. And obviously official Mandox on Twitter and all those things. And Mandox Create. We have a community space actually tonight. On Create, we do host spaces where people come and talk about their NFT projects or anything. I think what we're really excited about is with everything that Mandox Create will bring, there are so many NFT artists and projects out there that are literally waiting for this to drop. And we can't wait. We are so excited and very blessed, honestly, to be in this position. And those are the links. There will be some spaces, so if you guys check out the Twitter and everything, you'll definitely see everything that's going on.
Yeah, and if you check the video descriptions, I think we have links to all the Wire accounts, Wire Network. We've got links to everyone's Twitter, even Mandox, the Mandox Create. I think that's all in the YouTube video description there. If you're interested in following up with any of us, this show is evolving. We'll be here every week, Thursdays. We're not sure if we're going to keep the noon time. We may experiment with the time block depending on how the audience plays out. But we're going to do this once a week, at least visually on a live stream. We're also talking about doing some Twitter spaces, kind of a little bit more casual, kind of on the fly, a little bit more regularly. So keep an eye on the Wire Network Twitter account. We'll be also jumping in different spaces. I'm on a space with the Toli, ETH, and the Bad Bears tomorrow. We're jumping around doing all sorts of different stuff. We'll give you an update from Ken out in Dubai. We're going to start picking up steam as we go here. There's a lot of stuff that's kind of been happening behind the scenes, and we're excited to really start rolling this out into the public eye and bringing this stuff in front of you all. And so stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe on Twitter. And we'll catch you here next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Peace. Any final thoughts, Kyle? Anybody else?
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks to everybody who joined. Yeah, thanks for everyone to join. It was great.
Mm-hmm.